Frankfurt Airport, a major hub in the heart of Europe. With nearly 28 million passengers per year, it's Europe's second largest airport. A huge, sprawling complex which, including the various arrival and departure terminals, maintenance facilities, runways, etc., covers approximately 17 square kilometres. More than 100 commercial airlines fly into Frankfurt on a regular basis, which adds up to 3,000 departures each week to 220 destinations in 90 countries around the world. Equally important is air freight. Frankfurt handles 1.2 million tonnes annually, making it Europe's largest airport in terms of cargo. The airport and its ancillary services provide jobs for more than 50,000 people, roughly the population of a small town. Frankfurt is the home base and main maintenance base of the German carrier Lufthansa. The Lufthansa facilities, admin building, hangars and workshops stretch for well over a kilometre along the northern perimeter of the airport. The Lufthansa fleet, consisting of some 220 aircraft, is one of the most modern in the world. In addition to the Boeing 737, the fleet includes various Airbus models, the McDonnell Douglas DC-10, the Boeing 747-200, as well as the long-haul flagship, the 747-400. This aircraft, a further development of the early jumbos, the 747-100, 200 and 300, has been in service since 1989 and is easily recognisable by its characteristic winglets. Its wingspan of nearly 65 metres makes the 747-400 the largest aircraft in regular service in civil aviation, and discounting the Concorde, it's also the fastest. The all-passenger version has a seating capacity of 400 and a range of 12,000 kilometres. Maximum takeoff weight is 394 tonnes. It's powered by 4 fuel-efficient General Electric engines, which produce more thrust than those of earlier jumbos. The modern flight deck requires just 2 pilots. In the new glass cockpit, there are far fewer switches, warning lamps and control elements, while at the same time, the amount of information available to the pilot has been considerably increased. 6 large screens provide all the latest information. Lufthansa has 17 of these super jumbos in regular service, linking Germany with the rest of the world. A good reason to take a behind-the-scenes look at a long-haul flight and experience the organisation involved in it. Our journey will take us from Frankfurt to Hong Kong, considered by many pilots to be one of the trickiest airports in the world. It's a Sunday in late summer. Our captain is Peter Rogowski, chief pilot of Lufthansa's 747-400 fleet. Senior first officer is Anton Mürsmer, and first officer is Oke Dunsen.
So, dann wollen wir sehen. Ich hoffe, dass alles okay. Ja, guten Tag. Ja, nee, das ist. Ich habe mir gedacht, naja, man weiß ja nicht, ob es nicht doch eine Änderung, falls dann irgendein anderer Kapitän wäre oder so.
Their day starts in Frankfurt 90 minutes before scheduled departure. Due to the fact that the actual flying time will be approximately 12 hours, there are 3 pilots who will fly the aircraft in turn. The flight and cabin crews sign in. If the duty roster isn't complete at a predetermined time before departure, replacement staff have to be called in as quickly as possible. After being notified, standby personnel must report to the airport within an hour to ensure that the flight can leave on schedule.
Ich muss sagen, recht guten Tag, habe ich dazu mal gesagt. Ja. Grüße Sie. Rogowski.
Das ist ja alles nur noch Springer irgendwie, der ganze Urlaub.
Ja.
Fliegen Sie gleich wieder zurück, oder wie?
The chief steward on a flight, like on board a ship, is known as the purser, and while he and the cabin crew make their way to the briefing room, the captain and his co-pilots head for Frankfurt Dispatch to pick up all the necessary flight and weather information.
Was schreibst du jetzt? Guten Tag.
Ja, grüß Gott.
Frosch, guten Tag.
Frau Frosch, grüße Sie. Ja,
Guten Tag, müssen wir.
So, ich habe diese
Heute geht's nach Hongkong?
Genau.
Ja.
In the meantime, the dispatch office has prepared the operational flight plan.
Ja, ganz genau.
The plan for the Hong Kong flight has already been filed with all the air traffic control centres.
Mit Regen und
The schedule contains route maps, airport approach maps, weather information, plus all relevant technical data. Takeoff weight and type of freight are discussed. For example, are there any goods on board for which special regulations might apply? What about radio contacts or any airspace restrictions en route? There's also general information on the state of the aircraft. The crew go through each point one by one with the flight dispatcher. The captain and his two co-pilots, having studied the various documents, order the fuel for the flight, a process which generally takes about 5 to 10 minutes.
wir hatten bis vor kurzem von Kanton.
München.
Ja,
Ist schön
ganz
wie hier.
Süddeutschland schön eigentlich.
Wien. Istanbul auch.
Die haben zwischen.
Leaving the dispatch office, the flight crew make their way to the briefing room where the purser and the rest of the cabin crew have assembled. Here, they'll inform the cabin crew about the planned arrangements for the flight. The purser on our flight is Fritz Lengis, a man with years of experience of long-haul flights. The fact that Lufthansa has some 8,500 flight attendants on its payroll and that duty rosters are constantly changing means that people may be working together for the first time. So this pre-flight meeting gives members of the crew an opportunity to get to know one another. The purser has a few general notes about the flight and discusses each person's specific duties. Particular points and new aspects of in-flight service are discussed. The purser also passes on information about passengers requiring special attention, and occasionally training films are also shown on subjects such as how to behave in an emergency. The purser also reminds the cabin crew to have some toys ready for the younger passengers, but to keep some in reserve for the later stages of the flight. After all, 12 hours is a long time for youngsters, and it's important to keep them occupied. In the meantime, the flight crew has arrived in the briefing room. Captain Rogowski fills them in on the details about Flight 736 to Hong Kong. Preparations so far have taken roughly 30 minutes. There's just an hour left to departure.
Ich habe schon mal Ihren Namen eingetragen, 15300.
I'd like to introduce our senior first officer, Anton Mössmer. He's the one who, when the captain takes a well-earned rest, will be bearing the burden of responsibility. Oke Dunsen will be our co-pilot this evening. We'll be changing over twice during the flight.
Es ist sehr durcheinander. Es kommen immer neue Kollegen.
This evening we've been assigned our Victor Delta. We have a fairly full complement of passengers, even in first class. Our aircraft is parked at B38. Unfortunately, a baggage check has been ordered. We'll try and be out there as early as possible so that, despite the baggage check, we can get off on time. Routing is fairly standard, admittedly with a slight detour. Due to the situation in Afghanistan, we'll be taking the route across Iran. And because of the conflict in former Yugoslavia, we'll be flying via Bulgaria, over the southern tip of Romania, and will rejoin standard routing over Turkey. Then it'll be standard routing via Delhi and Calcutta to Hong Kong.
11 Stunden 47, eine relativ lange.
Estimated flying time is 11 hours and 47 minutes. A relatively long flight, so I'd be grateful if we could all meet downstairs as soon as possible.
First Class habe ich gehört. Ja, das ist sicherlich eine gute Sache.
We expect to encounter a bit of turbulence on the way. First of all, about half an hour out of Frankfurt, and probably again half an hour or so before landing. But in between, you should have plenty of time to look after our passengers and get their meals served. If things should get too rough and you feel we should turn on the signs, just let us know as always. Well, I don't think there's anything else of any importance. Hong Kong was hit by a typhoon, but it's moved inland now, though, as I said, we might catch a bit of turbulence in its wake, a bit of wind and some not so good weather. It's warm, though, 30, maybe even over 30 degrees Celsius. But even if things shake and rattle a bit, I'm sure you'll all cope with that and not let it worry you too much. I think that's about everything as far as I'm concerned. Is there anybody here making their first trip to Hong Kong? We'll look after you once we get going and let you know as much as possible about the city, places of interest, etc.
Die schaffen wir auch, ja. Die schaffen wir schon. Bei uns ist natürlich voll heute vorn, aber in guter Absprache werden wir da sicherlich einen Platz finden.
Sind in Naturklassen 40 Plätze mindestens.
Well, if that's all, I'd like to thank you for your attention and wish us all a good flight. We'll meet downstairs in about 5 minutes' time.
Unten, ja. Machen wir. Ja.
Wunderbar.
Gut.
Ciao, bis gleich.
For Hong Kong, they're doing the closing the boxes and then you get.
All prepared for their flight, the crew go to pick up their luggage and board the bus, which will take them to their aircraft.
Ja, nee, nicht mehr sein. Tauschen dann noch. Ach so, er hat die mit ihrer. Ja, ach. Ja, nicht.
Bis heute.
Dann hätte er auch unten bleiben können. Hätte er unten bleiben können.
The crew in Frankfurt will be taking charge of an aircraft which, thanks to the work of numerous engineers and mechanics, offers the highest standards of safety and reliability. In this huge hangar in Frankfurt, up to 8 wide-body aircraft can be serviced simultaneously. Every jumbo is booked in here after 350 flight hours, which means roughly once a month. To keep it fully operational, an aircraft, like a car, must be serviced regularly. Whereas the monthly A check takes about 30 working hours, the more comprehensive C check takes 700 and is carried out on Lufthansa jets after 3,000 flight hours, or approximately once a year. The checklist covers more than 100 procedures, inspecting tyres, brakes, engines, electronic and hydraulic equipment, changing hydraulic fluid and other necessary fluids, checking critical areas of the fuselage for corrosion, fatigue and dents. Inspections are based on the manufacturer's service instructions as well as Lufthansa engineers' years of experience. The global exchange of information between airlines and aircraft manufacturers is another important factor. Substandard parts have to be exchanged. The aim is to recognise and eliminate potential problems before they affect operations in any way. All in all, for every flight hour, Lufthansa spends 22 working hours on service and maintenance. But this is essential to ensure the airline's stringent standards as far as quality and safety are concerned. In the meantime, our flight and cabin crews are making their way to the aircraft's gate position. The bus driver certainly has to be alert to cope with all the different traffic and traffic signs, a job in fact which requires a special driving licence. In Frankfurt, just as at any other major international airport, it can take quite a while to reach the aircraft's gate position. Regular flyers, like pilots and flight attendants, who travel frequently to other continents with their very different climatic conditions, know exactly what type of clothing they need to take with them. The crew's cases are loaded separately from the passengers' luggage, so that on arrival, at the end of a long and, for the crew, tiring flight, it can be quickly transferred to the right baggage claim. The cabin crew and the two co-pilots board the aircraft, while the captain takes the time to check everything for himself. It's an opportunity to exchange a few words with the ground staff and highly qualified mechanics, many of whom he's known personally for years. Here, things have to run smoothly, because in the final analysis, it's the ground staff who are responsible not only for safety, but for ensuring that flights leave on time. The captain begins what's called the outside check. He examines the fuselage for any signs of damage and to satisfy himself about the overall condition of the aircraft. The check includes inspecting the skin, the control surfaces, and the engine cowlings. Particular attention is paid to the landing gear and the tyres. After all, when the aircraft lands at the end of an 11,000-kilometre journey, it's the tyres that have to bear the brunt of it and carry a weight of up to 628,000 pounds. His inspection concluded, the captain also goes on board. On the ground, some 40 people are still involved in preparing the plane for departure, refueling it, loading baggage, and making sure everything is stowed correctly. The purser informs the captain that they expect to be ready in 15 minutes or so, and adds, almost as an afterthought, that as they have a couple of newlyweds among the passengers, he'll put some champagne on ice and send them up to the flight deck later on.
Alles klar. Vielen Dank, Herr Lenker.
So. Der Chef entschwindet kurz.
For starch items.
Before start checklist.
Before start, demand pumps.
Aus, Auto.
Auto start switch.
On.
X.
The captain has now taken his place on the flight deck and is running through the flight plan with co-pilot Åke Dunsen. Altogether, they'll be carrying 386 passengers and their luggage, 19 crew members and 330,000 pounds of fuel. There are now just a few minutes to schedule departure time. They check the instruments and go through the pre-flight checklist. The captain is kept up to date about progress on the ground and in the cabin so that he can apply for start-up and pushback clearance.
Wie lange dauert's noch? Wir wissen dann noch bald Cargo zumachen und dann ist okay. Alles klar, dann fahren wir schon mal nach Pushback. Okay. Danke.
Apron contact, Lufthansa 736, request pushback Bravo 38.
Welchen Call von her?
Lufthansa 736, Bravo 38.
736, schönen guten Abend. Pushback approved, call in contact.
Pushing back, Lufthansa 736.
Go ahead. 11 August, centrally close direction. Rest is ready to pushback jetzt. Ja, parking brake is off und Sie können zurückstoßen. Push us back and the block time is 05. Okay, thank you. And the runway, die Bahn ist 18. Okay. Sie sagen uns, wenn wir ready for the engines sind. We're ready to start engines.
The ground crew signals that the push-out truck has docked and is ready to push back the aircraft. A display in the cockpit shows that all passenger and freight doors are securely locked and everything is ready for takeoff. The captain gives the signal for pushback. Takeoff is scheduled for runway 18 on the standard departure route Nördlingen to Sierra. Beforehand, the two co-pilots had fed all the relevant data into the navigation computer and noted down the takeoff data in the takeoff data sheet. This includes takeoff speed, as well as takeoff weight, outside temperature, flap positions, and numerous other important parameters. During pushback, the engines are started up in pairs.
Hydraulic pressure demand 4.
Jawohl. Engines 2 in 1, sir.
2 and 1.
The truck pushes the aircraft backwards to a position on taxiway November, from where it will proceed, under its own power, to runway 18. All 4 engines are now running, and the pilots check the instrument's normal position for takeoff.
After start items.
Record.
All systems are switched to their takeoff position.
After start checklist.
After starts. NTIs.
Auto.
Record.
And the co-pilot requests permission to taxi to runway 18.
Lufthansa 736, request taxi.
Lufthansa 736, taxi 18 via November.
18 via November, Lufthansa 736. Rechts ist frei.
Ja, jetzt muss ich.
The ground crew uncouples the push-out truck, and the captain gets the thumbs-up signal, indicating that the aircraft is cleared to begin taxiing. Slowly, the thrust levers for the 4 engines are pushed forwards, and 840,000 pounds of man and machinery gets underway. Ground speed is approximately 15 to 20 knots. Taxiing before takeoff and after landing is always the job of the captain. The flaps are set to their takeoff position, 20 degrees, and the flight control instruments checked. Captain and co-pilot discuss the assigned departure route, Nördlingen to Sierra, and the emergency measures to be taken in the extremely unlikely event of engine failure during takeoff. In taxiing to the runway, a 747-400 burns nearly 1,700 pounds of fuel, and by the time it reaches its cruising altitude after approximately 25 minutes, it'll have consumed more than 21,000 pounds of kerosene.
Lufthansa 736, wind 1904 knots, cleared for takeoff, runway 18.
Clear for takeoff, runway 18, Lufthansa 736.
Shortly before Lufthansa Flight 736 reaches the runway, the tower informs it that it's cleared for takeoff.
Confirmed. All throttle. Takeoff checklist completed.
The aircraft swings onto Frankfurt Airport's runway 18. The captain pushes the thrust levers forwards and gives the takeoff command. The engines howl as, with maximum available thrust, the huge aircraft lumbers along the runway, picking up speed as it goes. Once it's reached 80 knots, the co-pilot calls out the speed. This has a twofold purpose. It serves as an instrument check and also shows that the co-pilot is monitoring takeoff. The captain's reply is checked. After reaching the speed V1, which we'll explain later, the captain lets go of the thrust levers and grips the control column with both hands ready for liftoff. Once the instruments indicate what's known as VR speed, the captain pulls the control column forwards and the 747-400, which is now moving at nearly 210 miles per hour, majestically soars into the sky. Lufthansa Flight 736 is airborne. The landing gear is retracted and the aircraft climbs steadily. Takeoffs and landings in particular require all the pilot's concentration. Instruments and displays have to be constantly checked and compared to reference values. We're heading in a southeasterly direction towards Munich. Due to heavy traffic, we'll have to climb to our cruising altitude in various stages.
Frankfurt Command, Lufthansa 736, out of 2000, climbing 4000.
Lufthansa 736, guten Tag. Continue climb to flight level 90.
Climbing flight level 90, Lufthansa 736.
We start to climb to our assigned altitude of 9,000 feet, which gives us the opportunity to come back to the various speeds we mentioned during takeoff: V1, VR, and V2. V1, or decision speed, is the speed up to which takeoff can be aborted, for instance, in the event of engine failure. Once this speed has been exceeded, takeoff must be executed. Otherwise, there's the danger that it won't be possible to bring the plane to a standstill on the remaining length of runway. VR is the rotation speed, and V2, the speed required for takeoff, the minimum speed in relation to the takeoff weight, at which the plane can climb safely, even in the event of a failure of one engine. The extended flaps, which were set at 20 degrees for takeoff, are gradually retracted as the aircraft climbs. Since takeoff in Frankfurt, the captain has been flying the plane manually. Smoothly And with incredibly stable movements, the huge aircraft reacts to the slightest rudder changes. At an altitude of 6,000 feet, the captain engages the autopilot, which will keep the plane on the preset route. The air traffic control centres responsible for our flight instruct the captain when to climb to the next level on the way up to our final cruising altitude.
Radar Gunam, Lufthansa 736, out of flight level 60, climbing flight level 90.
Lufthansa 736, climb to flight level 130 to Nördling.
Climbing flight level 130, present position to Nördling, Lufthansa 736.
Lufthansa 736, climb to flight level 240, what's the present rate of climb?
Climbing flight level 240, present rate 2000, Lufthansa 736.
Maintain 2000 until out of 130, please.
Maintaining 2000 until out of 130, Lufthansa 736.
Lufthansa 736, contact München correction 133.752.
13375, Lufthansa 736, tschüss. München Gunam, Lufthansa 736, out of flight level 200, climbing flight level 240.
Lufthansa 736, radar contact. Confirm your requested level.
Stand by. Lufthansa 736 requested is flight level 330.
Okay, we have here 270 as requested level. So at the time, continue climb to level 250, entire level 10 miles per hour Nördlingen.
736 climbing initially flight level 250.
Lufthansa 736 is cleared initially 290.
Initially flight level 290, Lufthansa 736.
In the meantime, we've reached our initial cruising altitude of 29,000 feet. Munich is now behind us, and we're heading for Linz in Austria. Takeoff and climbing required the pilot's full attention. Now, the flight crew can start to relax a little.
Meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, hier meldet sich nochmal Ihr Kapitän.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've now reached our initial cruising altitude of 29,000 feet, or 8,840 meters. Later, during the course of this evening's flight, we'll be climbing slightly higher. I'd like to give you a little information about our route this evening. For those who'd like to follow it, you'll find a Lufthansa logbook in the pocket of the seat in front of you. If you turn to pages 124 and 125, you can see it marked on the maps there.
Unsere Flugroute nahezu genau eingezeichnet. Seite 124 und 125. Der Start in Frankfurt.
We left Frankfurt this evening on runway 18 on a southerly route. A left-hand curve brought us on course for Munich. From Munich, we continued in a southeasterly direction towards Linz in Austria. You'll find Linz marked on your map. As a result of continuing disturbances in former Yugoslavia, we'll be deviating from the normal route and flying north of Zagreb and Belgrade towards Istanbul, between Sofia and Bucharest, directly across the Balkans.
Istanbul, auch nördlich von Sofia und südlich von Bukarest, auf einem direkten Kurs quer durch den gesamten Balkan. Über Istanbul erreichen wir wieder
Over Istanbul, we'll pick up standard routing again and follow the marked red line in the direction of Ankara.
Es geht dann weiter mit Ostkurs.
Our flight will continue on an easterly course towards Tehran, which you'll also find marked on your map. We shall pass Tehran somewhat to the south, crossing the whole of Iran on a southeasterly course, heading for Delhi in northern India.
Folgen dann der roten Linie in der Karte südlich des
We'll continue to follow the red line south of the Himalayas in the direction of Calcutta. Our flight will then take us across the northern half of the Bay of Bengal and Dhaka towards the People's Republic of China.
Nach China, die Volksrepublik China ein.
The route then continues towards Kunming, where we'll be taking a more easterly course towards Canton, Guangzhou, to approach Hong Kong directly from the north. According to our calculations, flying time this evening will be 11 hours and 47 minutes. But I hope that we might be able to make up a bit of time during the night due to a fairly strong tailwind. I hope that, despite the long flight, you'll enjoy your stay on board with us and that you'll have a good flight.
Ein recht angenehmen Flug mit unserer Boeing 747-400 wünschen die heute den Namen.
Incidentally, our Boeing 747-400 this evening bears the name of the German city of Bochum. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, your captain again. We reached our initial cruising altitude of 29.
Lufthansa 736 maintaining flight level 330.
By now, Lufthansa flight 736 is slightly southeast of Budapest on course towards the Arad intersection. In the meantime, we've climbed to 33,000 feet. We're flying at Mach 0.86, in other words, 86% of the speed of sound. Since takeoff, we've used up 56,000 pounds of fuel.
Ankara Lufthansa 736 position.
Budapest is now a long way behind us, and during our flight across the Balkans, darkness slowly fell. We've crossed the Bosporus, past Istanbul and Ankara, and are now over the eastern part of Turkey. Ankara Air Traffic Control is now responsible for our flight. 450 nautical miles ahead of us lies the border to Iran. Our cruising altitude is still 33,000 feet. We report our position, Elazig intersection in eastern Turkey, as well as our estimated time of arrival over Sird, approximately 130 miles before the Iranian border. We've been in the air now for 3 hours and 15 minutes. After crossing into Iran, our flight took us southeast of Tehran towards Esfahan, and then in a more easterly direction towards Pakistan. Ahead of us now is the reporting point Tiger on the border between Pakistan and India. As we said earlier, due to the fact that it's such a long flight, there's a 3-man crew on board this evening to share the flight. Prior to takeoff, it was arranged that Captain Rogowski and co-pilot Dunsen would take the first shift, in other words, the takeoff and first part of the route. This gave Senior First Officer Anton Mersmer a chance to relax in the crew rest compartment behind the flight deck. He'll now relieve the captain and fly the next stretch together with Oka Dunsen. Our position is now approximately 10 minutes west of reporting point Tiger. We've almost crossed Pakistan and are approaching the Indian border. After Tiger, Frankfurt Dispatch had suggested two alternative routes. Because of traffic congestion and the fact that some control centres are occasionally closed, the crew should discuss with Indian Air Traffic Control which route to take, either via Delhi or one slightly further south. We've been assigned the northerly route along Airway Green 452 via Delhi. This airway will eventually bring us back to the standard route via Calcutta. Because originally the more southerly route had been programmed, the new data has to be keyed into the navigation computer. Our flight continues east along the foothills of the Himalayas. Around the world, air traffic radio communications are generally conducted using VHF frequencies. However, due to poor communication facilities here in India, they use shortwave frequencies. For the layman, it's virtually impossible to follow the conversation, as several stations frequently use identical frequencies. Somehow, though often only with great difficulty, our crew manages to find the relevant air traffic controller. We've just passed reporting point Tiger and have been assigned a new altitude, 37,000 feet. Clearly visible on the navigation display is our next position, Delhi, code Delta Papa November, and our estimated time of arrival, 23:21. The flight now follows the course of the river Ganges all the way to Calcutta. In India, in the spring and autumn, thunderstorms with cloud formations reaching as high as 50,000 feet are a fairly frequent occurrence. Linked to the monsoon rains, they're often so active that planes have to circumnavigate them. The red areas on the weather radar indicate strong thunderstorm activity. Fortunately, however, it's far to the north of our route. After a brief night, lasting only 5 hours, across northern India we witness one of those spectacular sunrises that you seldom see from the ground. Our position now is 100 nautical miles west of Calcutta on Airway Red 460. Our cruising altitude is still 37,000 feet, and we've been flying for 8 hours and 15 minutes. According to the navigation computer, by the time we reach Calcutta, we'll have made up the 2 minutes we've lost during the flight, and will, once again, be within the time schedule of our flight plan. At this stage of the journey, we've used 218,000 pounds of fuel and have covered a distance of 7,550 kilometres. Estimated flying time to Hong Kong is another 3.5 hours. With roughly 2/3 of the flight behind us, the cockpit crew changes again, and now it's time for First Officer Okkudunsen to take a well-earned rest in the crew's quarters until 30 minutes before landing in Hong Kong. Anton Mersmer resumes his seat as co-pilot and the captain takes over again. Up to now, the flight has been a smooth one, without any unforeseen incidents. While our flight crew is busy flying our Boeing 747-400 safely from Frankfurt to Hong Kong, we shouldn't forget the contribution made by the 16 members of the cabin crew. For over 8 hours, down below in the main cabin, the purser and the flight attendants have been looking after the well-being of the passengers. They've served food and drinks, kept the youngsters occupied by distributing toys, answered questions. In fact, done everything they could to make the long flight as comfortable as possible for everyone. The passengers are people from all over the world, from all walks of life, and very different cultural backgrounds. Sometimes, especially when a flight is heavily booked, it's not easy to attend to every passenger's individual wishes. Being a flight attendant with Lufthansa means having the opportunity to travel around the world, but it also means undergoing several months of rigorous training, covering such subjects as general information on food and beverages, how to handle dangerous situations, or how to react in an emergency. As we mentioned earlier, the purser on this flight is Fritz Lengis. As the most senior member of the cabin crew, he has a variety of functions. He supervises the in-flight entertainment program. He's the person to contact in case of any problems, and he draws up the duty schedule for the flight attendants. On extremely long flights such as this one, the cabin crew, like the flight crew, has its own rest compartment to which they can retire and relax for a while. Flight attendants on long-haul flights have to be flexible and physically fit. Night flights, time and climate changes, as well as unaccustomed food, are just some of the things you have to get used to. For aircraft to pay their way, they have to be in the air, early in the morning, late in the evening, during the night, at weekends and on public holidays. And they fly to destinations on all 5 continents, journeys that sometimes include a stopover of several days, providing the crew with a chance to get to know another country and its people. From Calcutta, we fly across the very northern tip of the Bay of Bengal and set a northeasterly course for the Chinese city of Kunming. Insufficient communication between the various control centres means that the crews here have to report according to the transmitting blind method. The various cockpit crews keep each other informed about their route, altitude and position by transmitting messages, like this one that we recorded on our flight back from Hong Kong.
All stations, this is Lufthansa 743, all stations, Lufthansa 743, flight level 9,500 meters, westbound from Hong Kong to Frankfurt, on airway Alpha 599er. Position Zulu November at 1645, estimate Kunming, Kilo My Golf 1652. Lufthansa 743, flight level 9,500 meters, westbound on Alpha 599er, out.
As we cross the Chinese border heading in the direction of Kunming, the Chinese controllers assign us a metric cruising altitude. We're now flying at 12,000 meters, equivalent to 39,400 feet. Over Kunming, we make an almost 90-degree turn and set course directly east towards Hong Kong, which is still approximately 700 miles away. Remaining flying time is estimated at approximately 1 hour and 35 minutes. There's now about 35 minutes left until we land in Hong Kong. First Officer Okkudunsen has relieved Anton Mersmer as co-pilot. The captain begins his briefing for the approach to Hong Kong. The general plan is discussed, maps prepared and radio frequencies set. The computer has calculated that the actual descent should start some 130 miles out of Hong Kong. The captain evaluates the available information and decides to start the descent roughly 30 miles before Canton, Guangzhou. After 11 hours and 15 minutes of routine flying, it's time for the cockpit crew to prepare for another maximum concentration phase. The approach to Hong Kong Airport is reported to be one of the most difficult in the world. Chinese control centres monitor our descent and provide us with various traffic information until handing us over to Hong Kong arrival. Our altitude is now 5,000 feet. We're roughly 20 miles away from Hong Kong's Kai Tak Airport, with the approach on the IGS landing system.
Hong Kong Tower, good morning, Lufthansa 736, established IGS 13. 736. Flaps 30, Flaps 30. Und den Speedback bitte. Final checklist. Final speed brake.
The instrument guidance system in Hong Kong requires an initial ILS approach, followed by a 45-degree turn at an altitude of only 130 metres, shortly before reaching what's known as the checkerboard, a 20 by 30 metre rectangular red and white visual approach aid, before coming in to land on a visual approach on Kai Tak's runway 13. The flight path passes directly over a densely populated residential district.
Line up in white, Cathay 410. Mike Alpha, traffic information opposite way, helicopter onward from Silvermine for Green Island and BMH. Mike Alpha, Roger.
11 hours and 44 minutes after leaving Frankfurt, our Boeing 747-400 lands safely in Hong Kong, right on schedule. A journey of some 5,920 miles, on which we've used over 300,000 pounds of fuel. After such a long flight, the crew has 48 hours to relax and catch up on some sleep. But after a turnaround time of only 1 hour and 45 minutes, the Boeing 747-400 will be in the air again, with a fresh crew on its way to Japan.
Lufthansa 736. Hong Kong ground, good morning, Lufthansa 736, runway vacated.
Lufthansa 736, Hong Kong, taxi via Bravo 1, Charlie 1, Delta 3 to Bay 2.
Bravo 1, Charlie 1, Delta 3, Bay 2, Lufthansa 736.
Let's just watch a few more aircraft coming in to land at Hong Kong Airport. Then we'll take you on a brief trip around this fascinating city. A curious mixture of Oriental traditions and British way of life. 48 hours after arriving in Hong Kong, Captain Peter Rogowski and his crew are on the move again, on a shuttle flight to Osaka.
Takeoff checklist.
Takeoff. Pax.
2 off.
Auto throttle.
Arm.
Takeoff data.
Confirmed.
Confirmed. Takeoff checklist completed.
Bedanke mich. Check Reitzeit.
Ja, rechts ist klar.
Departure Route hatten wir besprochen. Case of engine failure fliegen wir sie auch ab.
Ja.
Straight ahead erstmal bis Whisky 23 dB, 7000 Fuß.
Chinese 5012, contact approach 119.1.
101, good.
Lufthansa 736, wind 270 degrees 10, you're clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff 13, Lufthansa 736.
54 North Point, Frankfurt is better.
54 North Point, QNX 1008, departure to depart runway 1 straight.
54 North Point.
Charles Software 384, line up and wait.
Before our 747-400 takes to the skies again, we'd like to take this opportunity of wishing you all an enjoyable flight with Lufthansa. And auf Wiedersehen.
80.
Pilot 705, continue approach QNX 1008, wind variable 5 knots.
V1. VR.
Gear up.
Gear up.